Hi guys, I'm here to show you a required practical for your Chemistry GCSE C5 making salts. So today I'm going to be making copper sulfate using an insoluble base, which in this case is our copper oxide, and I'm going to be making that using sulfuric acid. I'm going to show you the process that you need to do, and I'm also going to show you and talk you through the theory behind it. So initially, I need to heat up a portion of acid. So I'm doing this using a beaker over a tripod, rather than heating up the acid directly into the beaker, as it's much safer. The only reason that we need to heat up the acid is to speed up the dissolving process. So, I'm now heating the acid. The next stage is to add copper oxide. So this is quite a dark black powder. And what I need to do is add an excess of this. So I'm going to stir this until all of it has dissolved. I'll then add another scoop, and I'll keep adding spatulas until there's always a small amount of residue at the bottom of my test tube. So I'm going to gently stir this. And as it dissolves, my solution will start to go blue. The reason I need to use an excess of the copper oxide is to ensure that all of the acid has been neutralised. When we make a salt, it's a neutral compound that's come from a metal and an acid. So this metal is going to be displacing the hydrogen in the sulfuric acid, replacing it with metal. I'll know that it's completely neutral because no more will be able to dissolve, and therefore I'll have an excess of my copper oxide that I will later need to filter out. I've now reached the point at which I've got an excess of my copper oxide. I'm now going to filter it, and what the solution I'll be filtering should be water and our salt, which is copper sulfate. So I now need to set up my filtering apparatus. For that, I'm going to use a circle of filter paper, fold it in half, and then in half again. This will give me a space that I can pour my solution into and allow it to slowly filter through. I need to be careful not to get any of the excess copper oxide into my solution, because then I will not have a pure sample of salt at the end. So this is quite hot. Unsurprisingly, I've been heating it over a Bunsen. So I need to use tongs when I lift this. Be careful not to squeeze them as I pour. So at the end, you can see I've still got quite a lot of black copper oxide in the bottom that hasn't gone through. My solution is now slowly filtering through. This is what we call the filtrate. So the solution that's dripping through, salt and water, is my filtrate. The black copper oxide that I'm catching in the top of my filter paper is called the residue. I will discard the residue, and I'm going to heat up the filtrate to give me pure salt crystals. Now that the filtration process is complete, I can get rid of the residue, which is the excess copper oxide that I just filtered out. And I can take my filtrate into an evaporating basin and use my Bunsen burner on a roaring flame to evaporate off the excess water. So the oxide was used to neutralise the acid. We then had a solution of salt and water. We're now going to evaporate off the excess water to leave us with pure salt crystals. You need to do this quite carefully so that you give the salt crystals time to form. If you overheat it, you'll be left with a more powdery substance, whereas if you heat it slowly, you'll be left with large crystals. The way in which you do this is to heat it until it's slightly bubbling, then take the Bunsen burner away. Once you're left with just a very small amount of water, these can be left on the side so the excess water can evaporate naturally. Here is an example of a finished product of copper sulfate crystals. So here's a quick recap of how to make salts from an insoluble base. Heat up your sulfuric acid. Add heaped scoops of copper oxide. Stir the copper oxide. Keep adding more until no more will dissolve. Filter out the excess copper oxide using a filter and filter paper. Discard your residue, which will be copper oxide, and take forward your filtrate that has come through the filter. Heat the filtrate over a Bunsen burner. Do this slowly so that large crystals will form. When there is a small amount of water left, either pat dry or leave in a windowsill to evaporate naturally.